Assassin's Creed 3, a game filled with so much promise, yet one a number of fans call one of the weakest games in the series. While I partly agree with this, I also think it's slightly unfair, and it definitely suffers coming off the back of the beloved Ezio trilogy of games, apart from perhaps Revelations, but I've already covered that. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that AC3 doesn't have its problems, as it certainly does, but coming back to it now, almost 12 years later, I feel I have a new appreciation for the game, especially knowing where the series will go. They do say hindsight is a wonderful thing. Released in 2012, AC3 had the distinction of being the first numbered entry in the series since AC2 3 years previously, which I think comes with its own pressures. At that point, players were starting to feel fatigued with the series, an issue that unfortunately only grew over the next several releases. As much as Ezio was a beloved character, there's little iteration over the last few games other than some minor hits such as the improvements in combat and introduction of recruits, but also some big misses such as the Den defences and Desmond's journey, which I personally felt was shoehorned in just to say that something new was added. Knowing also that development for AC3 started shortly after the conclusion of AC2, there were hopes for something fresh due to the previous game notably suffering from such a short development time. Now let's get into the game. As usual, this section is going to give an overview of the story, so there'll be some spoilers ahead, so if you have yet to play the game and don't want to know about the story, feel free to skip ahead using the timestamps below. AC3 shifts focus from Italy and Constantinople to America between the years of 1754 and 1783 during the time of the American Revolution. Play as half Mohawk, half English assassin, Radun Hai Gidon. I probably butchered that, so as to cause as little offence as possible, I'll use the adopted name Connor going forward. The game throws in a curveball off the bat though, where you don't initially play as Connor, but spend the first few hours of the game as Hatham Kenway, a noble Englishman and Connor's father. These missions of Hatham form the prologue to the game. It sees him travel to the colonies in America in search of a temple left behind by those that came before. There, he gathers a group of men to aid him in his mission where, in the process, they take down a slave trader and release a group of captive Native Americans. Hatham becomes extra friendly with one of them named Ezio, which results in Connor being brought into the world. At the end of our time with Hatham as a playable character, the infamous twist was revealed that Hatham and his men were not well-meaning assassins after all, but actually big bad Templars.
Wait, what?
Obviously this doesn't have the same effect now as I knew it was coming, but it was a big thing when the game released, as the story until that point had tried to warn the player to at least Hatham before revealing that he is one of the people you've been fighting against up until this point in the series. Focus finally switches to our main protagonist Connor, where we see him grow up, going from being a typical 4-year-old boy playing hide and seek in the woods with his friends, to a young adult wanting revenge against the Templars, and particularly the one named Charles Lee, who he blames for the death of his mother. At this point, he seeks out the former assassin Achilles, who trains Connor in the way of the assassins, even if reluctant at first. Connor doesn't officially become an assassin and get his robes until the end of Sequence 5, which takes roughly 6 to 8 hours to get to. This fed into criticism of the pacing of the game, and if the Hatham and young Connor sections are necessary. For me, I can agree that at points in the game, it does feel like some filler has been included and I wish they would just get on with it, but I wouldn't personally include the sections up to this point in that. I quite enjoyed playing as Hatham for the period of time and actually making the player grow a connection with him before the big reveal. I wouldn't say that's quite the same for his group of men, but we'll talk about that later. I also liked the build up of Connor's characters. I felt it gave a better appreciation for how he becomes the man he does by letting us play along with major moments instead of these just being cutscenes or dialogue presented after the fact. Now a fully fledged assassin, Connor starts his revenge tour by taking out the members of Hatham's merry band of men, but also being sucked into battles being waged as part of the American Revolution to try and ensure the freedom of his people. Like most of the Assassin's Creed games, Connor often finds himself at the centre of major historical events, such as the signing of the Declaration of Independence in this instance, and the game even goes as far as showing Connor being the reason for certain events actually unfolding. Further down the line, Connor even teams up with his father to take down a Templar who has gone rogue, but the partnership is short-lived as he realises their own personal beliefs conflict with each other. This results in Connor having to take out his own father in a very frustrating fight. This is due to an attack arranged by Connor and his father's location going wrong and only seemed to actually hurt Connor, so the screen is slightly blurred, the camera is swaying all over the place, and the only way to defeat Hatham is to throw him into environmental objects, before Connor dispatched with his hidden blade. Now the only person left is the one and only Charles Lee, Connor's original target. Connor finds Lee, which leads to a cool chase section through a burning shipbuilding site. Things become less cool though when he catches up to him. Connor is impaled with a pole while Lee gives a monologue over his downed opponent for some reason. While he's doing this, he somehow misses Connor reaching for his pistol, which is also being shot. They both end up in a pub where a powerful scene unfolds when nothing is said, but the character's animation tell all, and then Connor kills Lee, in a cutscene. This is where Connor's anticlimactic story comes to an end, at least from a main story perspective. Now I know it's quite divisive for people like the Assassin vs Templar undertones of the games, especially in the latter ones where it's just got a bit convoluted, but it does feel kinda like an afterthought in AC3. Personally, I do like the historical side of the game, and exploring what the time period may have been like, as that kind of thing has always interested me. But I do also like the AC elements, as that's what makes the series after all, for better or worse, and this game lacks that, at least outside the historical setting of the game. Of course the game does have its modern day storyline, where there's plenty of Assassin's Creedness, which I know that a lot of people are not fans of, but I personally feel that this is the best modern day part of any of the AC games, even if the story is not great. AC3 concludes the story of Desmond, who's been the modern day protagonist from the beginning, so you'd like to have hoped that he would have been given a satisfactory ending, but you would unfortunately be wrong. The story has Desmond and the gang locating the very temple Haytham was looking for to try and find a way to stop the disaster forewarned by the people who came before. To do this, he must insert multiple power cell cubes into sockets located around the temple, and of course the Templars conveniently seem to have 3 of these for some reason. This does take Desmond around the world, where he has to retrieve them from a skyscraper Manhattan, an MMA fight in Brazil, and even back to Abstergo Industries where the series began. I thought these sequences were pretty cool, as it provided a completely different type of setting from any historical worlds that have come before, and allowed Desmond to showcase the parkour and combat he'd picked up through the bleeding effect. I just felt these sections were too short when you just get into it. I think I'm probably in the minority, where I actually quite liked the Monday elements up until this point, and this was probably the last Monday parts I enjoyed. I have always wondered what a modern day Assassin's Creed would look like, and this is probably the closest we got to experiencing it. This is where what I liked about the Monday story in the game ends. Once all power cells are inserted, Desmond ventures further into the temple where he finds a pedestal and is confronted by holograms of both Juno and Minerva. Juno is trying to convince Desmond to touch the pedestal, which will save the world but will kill him. Minerva, on the other hand, is telling him not to, as this will allow Juno to escape and enslave humanity. Instead, he will help rebuild the world with a surviving population and become a messiah to them. The main caveat is that his words will be twisted long after he's gone and continue the cycle of violence and corruption that humanity always brings. All just seems a bit convoluted. Desmond decides to make the sacrifice as he believes humanity can fight Juno off, and that's where it ends. Again, just a bit anticlimactic and felt a bit rushed. I can't help but wonder if this is due to the series only originally planned to be a trilogy, but things were changed after the success of AC2 and Brotherhood and Revelations were introduced, which moved this game from being the 3rd game to the 5th. From what I've read from interviews with people who worked on the game, the original idea was for the catastrophe to actually destroy the planet, but Desmond and former teammate Lucy would have been able to escape and search for a new one, to colonise and start fresh in the vein of Adam and Eve. This would explain the video that players could piece together in AC2 through hidden glyphs, where 2 characters are shown called Adam and Eve. Another story thread, even if it was signed content, that never went anywhere. Now, one of the major criticisms of the game is the writing and inconsistencies of some of the characters in the game. Let's start with the main man himself, Connor. There is a lot of criticism of the voice actor sounding droll, monotone, and not charismatic in the slightest. Again, this was not helped when he was to follow the super charismatic shoes of Ezio, which came across as the polar opposite. While I do understand that Connor is a bit more reserved and serious due to the tragedies he's experienced in his early life and his upbringing, I did find it hard to listen to him during some cutscenes, as what he was saying came across disingenuous and like he couldn't be bothered being involved in whatever conversation he is in. The characterisation and writing for Connor also feel inconsistent, perhaps the word that should be the tagline for this game. During the main story of the game, Connor is shown to have moments of leadership and intellect in how he deals with those around him and helps sway the tide of the war, but those moments are outweighed by other aspects that make him feel naive and brash. A prime example of this is his vendetta against Charles Lee that pretty much makes up all the Connor's portion of the game. This is understandable due to the initial interaction he had with Lee and believing that he is the cause of his mother's death. When he finally meets Achilles and learns that his father is the leader of the Templars, who would have ordered Lee to attack his village, he still primarily has him in his sights, which is where the infamous "Where is Lee?" meme came from.
Where is Charles Lee?
It gets even more confusing when it's revealed that the attack was actually ordered by Washington. Connor does show minor annoyance, but doesn't seem to want to take Washington down in the same way, and even works with him at later points while continuing his pursuit of Lee. I get that he obviously wants to take down the Templars now that he's an assassin in his own right, but it just doesn't make complete sense. Other than that, if you include the side content of the game, Connor doesn't sound any more interested, but it does give the character more depth, especially in the homestead missions, which I'll discuss more a little later. Haytham's group of Templars don't escape the characterisation criticism. When Haytham is gathering them together at the beginning of the game, they only really get introduced in a single mission, in a brief conversation, and that is it. Outside of that, not much else is revealed about them until Connor takes them out when they seem surprised and upset that he's done so, due to all the good they were trying to prove, without even a little proof of it. The only Templar that got more exposure was the focus of Connor's infatuation, Charles Lee, though he also seemed to have a Jekyll and Hyde personality. When first met, he seemed such a nice guy who you felt you could trust and get behind, but that didn't last due to him trying to choke out a child as soon as he bumps into Connor. I get that the intro was trying to trick a player into thinking that the group were assassins before the big reveal, and a few years have passed since then, but it seems like a major flip in the character. Now, I feel I have been a little negative on the character presentation so far, but a major positive I have is the efforts Ubisoft went to depict the Native American population as accurately as possible. As soon as it was decided that they were going to be depicted in the game and obviously be part of Connor's heritage, it had to be treated with great care and sensitivity. Ubisoft went as far as hiring experts in Native American culture and languages to ensure this, and speaking from an outside perspective and what I've read, the depiction was well received. I unfortunately do need to add in a negative caveat to this, in that as much as the Native American characters were depicted well, it did feel that they were kind of forgotten about as soon as Connor leaves in search of the assassins, other than a couple of missions in the late game. I think it would have been good to have more of a focus on that culture since they're a big part of Connor's identity. I think it's safe to say definite improvements were felt in the look and feel of the world of AC3. I played the version originally released on the Xbox 360, just like in my previous videos, rather than the remastered edition just to get a proper feel for how the original holds up. I'm also aware that the remaster comes with its own issues and graphical changes which I've heard other videos say worsens the overall look and feel of the game. For AC3, Ubisoft introduced its new Anvil Next engine that will be used for the remainder of the AC games released in the 7th generation of consoles. You can definitely see the improvements it brought, with the location in the game looking stunning with improved lighting. It also allowed the developers to add more weather effects, which allowed for there to be two versions of each location, one with snow and one without, which completely changes the feel of traversing the map, and thankfully getting around the snow is nowhere near as bad as the snowy areas in Red Dead Redemption 2. The new engine also allowed for more NPCs to be on the screen at the one time, which made the city locations feel more lived in and alive with AI just going around completing their menial tasks. It also made the moments where battles were involved feel more epic as they should be. The locations available in-game are Boston, New York, and the large forested frontier area that connects the two, similar to Kingdom in the first game. Both the city locations are well designed and look good, though I will say it's hard to differentiate the two as they both look the same. Also, due to these locations being fairly new in that time period, the same level of verticality isn't available like the century old buildings in the likes of Florence and Rome. As well as the streets of cities, they also have an underground area which can be explored where fast travel points can be discovered and opened. This allows the player to open the map, select one of these points, and instantly travel to these locations. I didn't really see the need to open them though, as there are already fast travel points available at docks and entrances to each location, which I found were good enough, so only went underground in a couple of missions that require Connor to do so. You can also view other locations on the map and fast travel to them from wherever you are. Due to this, I hardly use horses. I also found them still a bit annoying to control, and with the many cliffs in the frontier, it was easier just to get around on foot. The frontier is where the main setting differences are felt. Connor is able to climb and traverse through the trees, which is where the new parkour style shines, which I'll discuss in a moment. It can be fun to traverse through the trees and hunt enemies and animals from above and take them out with ease. The only disappointing part of this though is not all trees are climbable, and the route that can be taken through the trees is linear with little to no deviation, so as soon as you're up there, it feels like the path putting you right back on the ground again. As the gameplay not evolving much over the last number of games, and players starting to feel that it's getting a little stale, AC3 really needed to make some changes to freshen things up. But did it? Yes and no. The game did introduce some new gameplay elements, but ultimately it kinda just fell into the Ubisoft template that all their open world games did at that time. For some reason, how climbing and parkour is controlled was changed to use a single trigger, rather than the trigger and button combination used up until that point. I do get it in the fact that it makes movement feel more seamless, especially when moving around the trees in the frontier, but it was really frustrating when running around the streets of one of the cities and Connor just wanted to climb parts of the environment that you didn't want him to and just breaks the flow running around. Also, I'm not sure what they did with the walking and running animation, as it just feel a bit off. One nice additional feature allows Connor to dash through the door or window of a house to get to the other side quicker. Sure, this is still an animation that does get repetitive, but I thought it was pretty cool the first time I played it. Stealth have also been changed in AC3. You can still use social stealth by hiding amongst groups of NPCs and within wells and piles of leaves, but now the player can also use corners of buildings or fences, which is helpful in many tedious tailing missions which are staple Assassin's Creed games to keep your target in sight. Tall grass can also now be used for stealth. When Connor enters the tall grass, he will automatically crouch and be hidden from enemies, and now also one of the many animals which can be found around the frontier, though I didn't use it often as it could be more tedious than just attacking head on. Speaking of animals, a hunting mechanic has been introduced in AC3. While on the frontier, the player will encounter a range of animals including deer, rabbits, wolves and bears. The latter two will attack on sight, but it only takes a couple of button presses to defeat them, so they don't pose that much of a threat. To successfully hunt some of the more timid animals, baits and traps can be used. Connor is proficient in tracking and will find clues scattered around which will point to the location of that animal. This can sometimes be frustrating to trigger, so it's just as easy to attack head on or from above as the eye is not the smartest, or may just glitch out on you as happened to me. After successful hunting animals, their pelts can be taken and sold to town to earn some money. As much as it was refreshing to have some new gameplay elements added to the game, it did feel a little like they tried to do too much, as if there were a lot of ideas were just thrown in to see what worked and what didn't. I really enjoyed the combat in AC3. I made a comment that the combat in Revelations looked cool and brutal, but felt slow and unsatisfying at times. It may not have changed much here, but I thought it felt a lot smoother. Sure, it promoted the same counter kill and combo strategy was introduced in Brotherhood, but it just felt good with many different animations depending on the weapon being used, adding the ability to counter more than one enemy at a time, which resulted in its own cool animation, as well as environmental counters such as running up and bouncing off a wall if close enough when initiating the counter. Connor can also use enemies as human shields when someone is taking aim at him to protect himself from the shot. With a new time period comes some new weapons, and this includes a musket. It has the perk of being able to use it from range as well as in close combat where enemies can see what it feels like to be a skewer. Using it ranged as well as any gun can be a bit annoying with the time it takes to reload. Connor also brings the bow to the table, and further down the line he gets access to the rope dart, which can be used to string enemies up in trees if using it from a branch. The main missions of AC3 don't differ much from what has been seen so far in the series. You have your healthy dose of missions including following someone from point A to point B, attacking a group of enemies, and the always fun tailing missions. There are also now the occasional eavesdrops missions where you have to stay in a circle, both stationary and on the move, to overhear the conversation of some NPCs. These are fine, but the moving ones can be a bit of a pain to keep up with and will often fail one of the additional objectives tied to keeping within the circle. Speaking of the optional objectives, these return again to provide varying degrees of frustration and what feels like a whole new level of difficulty. Of course, you don't need to complete these unless you're on the 100% sync completion, but I did try and do them where possible, and it is just the OCD point of annoying where the red text and cross flash up on the screen almost to mock and revel in my failure. Of course, AC3 comes with a good amount of side content as well. A returning piece of side content is Assassin Recruits, but this time it's slightly different. Rather than recruiting random members of the public, only 6 distinct people are available for this, each with their own storylines and abilities. This does make each one a bit more relatable and interesting, though it is a slight shame that all but one of these are part of the side missions, so there's a good chance that some people will never see this due to just playing through the main missions. I will point out though, a confusing moment where these recruits save Connor at a certain point in the story, regardless if their missions have been done or not, so I can see that causing some confusion. Another piece of side content that I fear some players will miss is homestead missions. These involve people passing through and eventually settling the grounds of the Davenport homestead while providing services such as carpentry or tailoring. I wasn't really interested in the services aspect of what they provided, but more so the story that unfolds through missions tied to them. This is where we see a softer side of Connor, and it's nice to see him take a break from the war and Lee chasing, even if he still doesn't sound happy to be speaking to anyone. It is also a shame that the conclusion to Connor and Achilles' story was tied to the end of these missions, as I felt this should have been part of the main story. A naval element was also added in AC3. The combat system is bare bones and pretty basic with limited weaponry to begin with, but I think it's safe to say that this was the precursor which formed the ship combat and traversal in Black Flag. It's possible to upgrade your ship called the Aquila to strengthen it and unlock new weapons, which are required for the many naval missions available, but again, I never really touched them. The naval elements are fun, but just didn't see much point in them outside the main missions that required to control the ship, and it's not as if it's a big part of traversal like in Black Flag, as areas to use them are their own separate locations. Some of the other side content includes the likes of missions given by a strange man on the homestead called Pegleg. These are the closest to Assassin Tombs and the likes from the Ezio trilogy, and I feel gives a better feel for the improved parkour in a more confined, if yet linear, environment. The player will also be presented with tasks that can be completed for the hunting and combat clubs that kind of just pop up as you're doing things around the frontier, and include hunting certain animals or taking down a certain number of a certain type of soldier. You also of course have what feels like the mandatory collectible, and this time it comes in the form of pages from Benjamin Franklin's almanac. This is where they seem to have decided that it was too easy to pick up the collectibles that are stationary, and now you have to chase them down. This is fine, but can be frustrating when, for example, Connor decides he wants to go in a different direction from the page, which results in getting to the end of his predetermined route, vanishes, and you have to wait some time for it to respawn at its starting location. The last side content I'll touch is on minigames that can be mainly found in pubs scattered around the map. These offer 2 different board games, which I have no clue how to really play, and only really did so out of curiosity. As is the way of the series, and really the gaming landscape at this point, DLC was of course offered up post-launch. I believe that this is when the first season pass was introduced for an Assassin's Creed game. Please let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. Some of the new content included are the usual extra weapons and outfits for Connor, as well as a new naval mission and access to a secret location. As has been the case for the last couple of games, there were also new characters and maps added for the multiplayer mode. A small aside on the multiplayer, again I was unable to technically play it due to servers being shut off, but they appear to have included an offline mode. Obviously this is not as fun as when playing with and against others online, but at least it gives you a taste of what it was, which is an improvement in previous games where the mode can't even be loaded anymore, so well done Ubisoft there. It's safe to say the main piece of DLC which was added was the Tyranny of King Washington expansion. Again, I will briefly touch on the story, so if you don't want to know, I'll put a timestamp on screen to skip it. It's set many years after the end of the main story, and involves George Washington finning an apple of Eden, which shows both him and Connor and also America, where Washington has proclaimed himself the king of the country, has gone mad with power, and uses the apple to control the population. Connor taps into powers presented to him by drinking tea from a sacred tree where he encounters his spirit animals. These include the wolf cloak ability that lets him go invisible, eagle flight which allows Connor to fly to and from tree branches and ledges, and bear might which allows him to pound the ground to take out a group of nearby enemies. By utilising these abilities, and with assistance from other prominent rebels, he is able to take down Washington, and it is revealed that this was all just a vision of what could happen. To ensure it doesn't, Washington gives Connor the apple, who throws it to the bottom of the ocean. I've seen the Tyranny of King Washington was criticised for only being a what-if scenario, and people wished it was longer, but I have to say I quite liked it as I found the story of an alternate timeline interesting, and it was different enough from the main game to make it enjoyable. Also, as much as the location hadn't changed a great deal, I do like the changes that had been made, such as the massive pyramid that Washington had just casually erected in the middle of New York. I also found the powers granted fun, and it was the closest that the series had come to providing a mystical element outside the apple stuff obviously. The powers provide different ways enemies could be dealt with, and a new level of stealth. They also couldn't be abused by using them all the time, as doing so depletes Connor's health, so they need to be used more strategically while in fights for example, or when trying to move around stealthy as the next cover will need to be found before the health can be recouped. There are of course parts of the DLC which I wasn't a big fan of. First, my first crash of the game occurred a short while into the first part, which was the first one I experienced throughout my entire playthrough of the game. This also came along with some bugs which weren't a major issue, but occasionally broke the immersion. I did also find it frustrating that Connor was pretty much at full notoriety the full time. This meant that combat encounters happened pretty often, and even though I do like the combat in AC3, it just got a bit tiresome. At least the fast travel is still present and can be used to travel exactly where the mission marker was to start the next one. So, does Assassin's Creed 3 hold up in 2024 and is it worth playing? I would say definitely. Even though it is divisive amongst fans and has a number of issues which I've outlined throughout this video, it's still a fun game and given more criticism than it deserves. It introduced a fresh environment and time period after the last few years with Ezio in Italy and Constantinople. It also looks stunning even in the Xbox 360 version now, and that was a big part down to the new engine that was introduced. As much as I didn't run around a lot due to the ease of using the fast travel system, it was still fun at times to parkour through the treetops and just mess around in that environment. As also previously stated, I really did enjoy the combat in AC3 and would probably be close to one of my favourites alongside the changes that were made to the combat in Brotherhood. One thing I wasn't a fan of though was having to go into a sort of menu to scroll to weapons and tools that weren't included in the quick select directional buttons, as it felt cumbersome and just paused the game to go into the menu, so it took you out of the moment. Of course the story in AC3 isn't the strongest of the series, but it's nowhere near the worst. Sure, there are some inconsistencies, but I enjoyed it nonetheless and just like seeing different time periods, even if that includes the weird Assassin's Creedness layered on top of it. So I'd say it's definite must play for any fans of the series and anyone who wants to mess around an American Revolution setting. I know I stated I heard that the remastered edition had some issues compared to with the original, but do understand it is easier to get hold of, so say go for that if it's still your only option. Thank you as always for anyone who watched this video, and I want to send a special thank you to anyone who's watched or interacted with any of my content up until this point. I want to apologise for the time it's taken to get this video out, but really seeing the difficulties of trying to balance a larger video like this, including editing, and normal work-life balance, but hoping to improve that. I took a slightly different approach to this video, so let me know if you like it or not, or if you prefer the format of the previous videos in the series. It would be greatly appreciated if you could give the video a like and subscribe to the channel, as well as leave any comments below on any improvements I can make, any things you may want to see on the channel, or even any memories you have of AC3. See you in the next video.